I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to catch his wife cheating on him, but here I am. It started about 6 months ago when I noticed some strange things, little signs that didn't add up. She'd be unusually secretive with her phone, texting late into the night, and I'd catch her nervously slipping her phone into her purse when I entered the room. At first, I told myself it was just work stuff or her trying to hide a surprise, but deep down, I knew something was off. The gut feeling gnawed at me, and I kept telling myself I was paranoid. The biggest red flag came a few weeks ago. I was out of town on a business trip and she was supposed to come with me. But days before, she suddenly canceled, saying she had an urgent meeting at her office. I was annoyed but didn't push it. Still, I felt that nagging suspicion. Then I noticed a hotel in her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. It was a small, shiny plastic card with a hotel logo I didn't recognize. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. Why would she have a hotel in her purse? Who was she meeting? That night I kept staring at the card, trying to make sense of it. I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I knew I had to find out the truth. So I started listening closer, watching her actions more carefully. And sure enough, that weekend I found myself in her phone. I wanted to believe she was just working late, but her texts kept giving her away. The messages weren't about work. They were flirtatious, casual, but enough to make me sick. One message in particular made my stomach drop. It wasn't just the usual small talk. It was clear she was planning something. She was talking about a special night and using code words I'd never heard before. I recognized her boss's name, Mark. I'd seen him around the office plenty, but I never thought he'd be in my house or my life like this. When I saw those texts, the red flags turned into giant neon signs. I confronted her that night, demanded the truth. She looked caught, her face flushing so red I thought she might explode. She tried to deny everything at first, but I didn't buy it. The evidence was staring me in the face. That hotel, found it tucked inside her makeup bag, hidden beneath her foundation. The texts on her phone, I snapped screenshots of every single one. The way she avoided my eyes and stammered when I asked about her plans, that confirmed everything. It wasn't just an affair, I realized. She'd been planning our wedding behind my back, probably with Mark. They'd been texting, meeting, sneaking around, while I was at work, oblivious. My stomach clenched so tight I thought I might be sick. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. How long had she been lying? How many nights had I slept next to her, clueless? I felt a strange mix of anger and betrayal. All those years I worked hard to build a life, to give her everything, love, stability, respect, and she was out there plotting against me. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. My voice came out cold when I told her, "You've been meeting him at our house." Behind my back, after everything we've been through. She stammered, tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't care. That was the moment I knew I had to plan something. Not just to punish her, but to make her understand what she'd done. I started thinking about how I could turn the tables. I wasn't just going to walk away from this humiliated. I wanted to make her regret it, see her face when she realized I'd taken control. That's when the revenge plan started forming. I didn't want some messy fight that would ruin everything. I wanted something clean, something she'd never see coming. I needed her to feel the weight of her betrayal, but in a way that would hit her where it hurt the most. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I'd be the one to decide her fate. She thought she was clever, sneaking around, but I was about to show her just how clever I could be. The first step was gathering evidence, which I already had. The second was planning how to execute my move without her suspecting. I knew her habits, her routines. I knew when she was most vulnerable. The plan had to be foolproof. I needed to make her see that her lies were over, that I was no longer the naive fool she thought I was. Now I just had to wait for the right moment. The ball was in my court and I was ready to strike. I could feel the adrenaline rush through my veins, making my palms sweat and my heart hammer in my chest. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without consequences. I was done playing the fool. The game was about to change. I spent the next few days walking around with a simmering rage I couldn't quite control. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her texting Mark, planning her next meeting. The hotel still burned in my mind. It felt like my world was cracking open and I couldn't piece it back together. My stomach was in knots, and I felt this constant tightness in my chest, like my lungs couldn't get enough air. I was furious, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I let my anger take over, I'd ruin everything. That evening, I decided I needed to prepare everything perfectly. I wanted her to see the consequences of what she'd done, but I also wanted to keep control of the situation. I sat at my desk, going over my plan again and again, ensuring every detail was tight. I had to make sure she'd walk right into a trap she couldn't escape from. My first move was to set the stage. I knew she'd be home that night, probably expecting me to be oblivious like usual. I waited until she left work early, which she often did, to meet Mark. She thought I didn't know, but I'd been watching her routines. I'd been doing my homework. I knew her habits. I knew when she'd be at her worst, when she was most vulnerable. I wanted it to be perfect. That night I installed hidden cameras, not just in the living room but also in the bedroom, the kitchen, even the hallway outside her office. I wanted every word, every movement, every touch. I wanted her to see she was caught. I also left a small but crucial piece of evidence in plain sight: her hotel, deliberately placed on the dining table, right in the center of everything. I knew she'd see it when she got home. I wanted her to know I had proof and I had plans. When she finally walked in, I was sitting calmly on the couch, pretending I didn't notice the tension in her shoulders. She looked nervous, almost guilty. I kept my tone neutral but firm. "You're home early," I said. "I figured you'd be working late tonight." She blinked. "Yeah, I got out early. Things are slow at the office lately." I nodded, eyes fixed on her face. "Really? Because I found this." I reached across and picked up her hotel, holding it between my fingers. Her eyes widened. "What's this doing here?" She hesitated, swallowing hard. "It's just a souvenir from a business trip I didn't go on." "Don't lie," I said, voice low but steady. "I found it tucked inside your makeup bag yesterday. Looks like you've been meeting someone at a hotel. Someone named Mark, maybe." Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," I shot back. "I've got the messages, the screenshots, the proof. You've been sneaking around behind my back, planning your wedding with him, just like I suspected. And all this time I was working, trying to build a life with you." She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears didn't fit her face. Instead, she looked angry, cornered. "It's not what it looks like. You're overreacting." "Really? Because it looks pretty clear to me," I said. "You've been lying to my face. While I was out there trying to provide for us, you were busy playing house with your boss. How long has this been going on?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I saw her eyes flicker with something: guilt, defiance. I didn't care. I was simmering with rage, ready to make her understand just how betrayed I felt. "I've got more than enough evidence," I said, "and I'm not about to let this slide. You can pack your stuff. We're done." My voice cracked slightly, but I kept a steady gaze. "I want you out by the end of the week, and don't bother trying to lie your way out of this. I've got everything on camera." Her jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake. You don't know everything." "Oh, I know enough." I stood up, confident now. "And I know I deserve better than a cheating liar. So go ahead, pack your things, but remember, I'll be watching, always." She stared at me in silence, then suddenly turned and stormed into the bedroom, grabbing a bag and throwing her clothes inside. I stayed rooted to the spot, feeling the cold fire of victory and disgust coiling inside me. I could feel my heart pounding, my palms sweaty, every nerve in my body alert. Before she left, I looked her straight in the eyes. "And don't come back. Not unless you want the full truth out there for everyone to see." She shot me a venomous look but said nothing, just slammed the door behind her. I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. I knew I'd crossed a line, but honestly I didn't care. I'd finally taken control. Now I sat back on the couch, staring at the camera feeds I'd set up. Watching her pack, I felt a strange relief, the kind of relief that's mixed with rage and humiliation. She thought she was so clever, sneaking around behind my back, planning her future with someone else. But I'd beaten her at her own game. I'd made sure she'd leave with her tail between her legs, knowing she'd been caught. I looked at her abandoned suitcase. The plan was only beginning. I had everything I needed now. The stakes had been raised, and I was ready to follow through with the next steps. It was time she knew exactly what she'd lost, and that I was never going to be the fool she thought I was. After she stormed out that night, I sat alone in silence, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settle over me. My hands were still damp from gripping my coffee mug, and my heart was pounding so loudly I thought she might hear it. The adrenaline rush was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I had finally taken the first real step toward reclaiming some shred of control, but I knew the real game was about to start. I spent the next morning reviewing everything. The footage from the cameras, the screenshots of her texts, the hotel, all of it together painted a clear picture. She'd been lying, sneaking around, probably planning her wedding with Mark even as she pretended everything was fine. The betrayal cut so deep I felt it physically in my stomach. It was like someone had punched me right in the gut, and I couldn't breathe right. That was the moment I realized I needed a plan that would leave her feeling every ounce of what she'd done. By noon, I was already sketching out my strategy. I knew I couldn't just confront her again and expect her to crumble. She tried to deny everything, and honestly, I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper again. I wanted her to see what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away, and how much I was willing to do to make her pay. I decided to use her own game against her. If she thought she was clever, I'd prove her wrong. I wanted her to realize that I'd been planning this from the start. I wasn't just reacting. I was calculating every move, every possible outcome. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about her understanding she'd been outsmarted, that I was finally in control. The first part of my plan was to make her think she still had some power. I sent her a casual message, pretending to be calm and understanding, asking her to meet me at the house. My goal was to get her there alone so I could finally lay everything out face to face. I knew she'd come, probably expecting to negotiate or maybe even beg. That's what I wanted. I wanted her to think she still had the upper hand, for her to drop her guard just enough for me to strike. When she arrived that evening, her face was a mask of defiance. She looked combative, like she was ready to argue her way out of everything. I kept my tone even, but the coldness in my voice was unmistakable. "Sit down," I said, pointing to the couch. She hesitated but obeyed. "Let's not pretend anymore. I know what you've been doing. The hotel, the texts, the meetings at our house." She looked down, silent. "I've got everything on camera," I continued. "You thought you were so clever, sneaking around behind my back, planning your wedding with Mark. But I've been watching every step you take." Her eyes flickered with a mix of guilt and anger. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand more than you think," I cut her off. "You played me for a fool. I worked my ass off to give you everything, and this is how you thank me, by cheating, lying, and using my house as a rendezvous point." Her jaw tightened. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," I said, leaning forward. "You've been planning your future with him, didn't you? While I was out trying to keep our life together afloat." She looked like she was about to burst into tears or scream, but I kept going. "You know what your problem is. You've always thought you could do whatever you want and I'd never find out. But I did. I caught you, and now it's time for you to see what happens when you betray someone like me." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she finally looked at me with a mix of fear and regret. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to see the damage she'd caused. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did," I said, "because I don't want to be with someone who lies and cheats. You're finished here." She stared at me, silent, then finally whispered, "You're overreacting. You don't know the whole story." "I know enough," I said coldly. "And I know I don't want to be with a liar, but I'm going to give you one last chance to pack your things and leave, because I'm not going to share my life with someone who thinks she can cheat and get away with it." She looked away, furious but defeated. That's when I pulled out some of the evidence I'd collected. The screenshots, the footage, the hotel. "Here's everything," I said, sliding my phone across the table. "You can run, but you can't hide from the truth." Her face drained of color. "You're insane." "No," I said, "I'm just done being a fool, and I want you gone by the end of the night." She got up abruptly, shouting, "You're making a huge mistake." I wasn't listening anymore. I'd made my move. The game was on, and I was ready to see how she'd react when she realized she had no choice but to leave. As she slammed the door behind her, I felt a strange combination of relief and icy determination. She'd betrayed me, and now I was going to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal without mercy. The next step, that's when things really started to get interesting. That night after she left in a whirlwind of shouting and slammed doors, I sat in the quiet that followed. The house suddenly felt enormous, empty in a way that made my skin crawl. My heart was still racing, my mind a jumble of anger and triumph. I had played my hand, and I knew she wasn't coming back that night. Still, I wasn't done. The plan had only begun to take shape. I stayed up late, poring over everything I'd gathered. The footage, the screenshots, the hotel, each piece fit together perfectly. I knew her routines, her habits, her weaknesses. I'd studied her for months, and now I was ready to execute the next phase of my revenge. I'd show her she'd been outsmarted, humiliated, and most of all, caught. My first move was to use her own social circle against her. I found her closest friends, contact info, and sent them a message, carefully crafted so they'd see what kind of person she truly was. But I didn't accuse her outright. Instead, I sent a short, factual message. Just so you know, I have proof that she's been cheating on me with her boss and planning her wedding behind my back. Be careful around her. I wanted the message to ring loud and clear. I knew some of her friends, and I knew they'd either confront her or distance themselves once they found out. I also decided to call her boss, Mark. I kept my tone cold and professional, demanding he come clean. He tried to deny everything at first, but I had the screenshots, the timestamps, everything. When I laid it out plainly, her texts, her hotel key, her plans, he finally admitted they'd been seeing each other. That was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Now I had to make her see she'd lost everything. I wanted her to understand she couldn't hide anymore, that her little secret was no longer safe. So I devised a plan to leak some of the evidence to her friends, her family, maybe even her work colleagues. Not in a malicious way, more like showing her she'd been caught in her own web of lies. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, and helpless. The next morning I crafted a message, a simple email with all the evidence attached, addressed to her best friend. I didn't want to send it directly from my main account, so I used a burner email. I told her friend that I just wanted her to see what was truly going on. I hit send, then waited to see what would happen. In the meantime, I started planning our departure. I knew she'd be back that evening, probably trying to confront me again or even plead her case. I wanted to be ready. I planned to be firm, unemotional, and in control. My goal was to make her realize that her lies had consequences and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. When she arrived home, I was already waiting. She looked tense, eyes darting around the house like she was expecting something. I kept my face stoic. "You're back early," I said, voice flat. She looked at me, desperation flickering across her face. "Look, Save it," I interrupted, holding up my phone. "I've seen the messages, I know everything, and I've already sent your friends the proof. There. Going to see the real you." Her eyes widened, then she lunged toward me, her voice trembling with anger and shame. "You're just trying to ruin me." "I'm just showing you what you've already done to yourself," I said coldly. "You betrayed me, and now everyone knows. You're not going to play the victim anymore. You're the one who lied, who cheated, who planned her wedding behind my back. I'm done pretending I didn't see it." She backed away, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. It's not what you think. I think you've been caught," I snapped. "And I don't want you here anymore. Pack your things and leave. I want you gone tonight." My voice hardened. "And don't bother calling me or coming back. I've had enough of being made a fool of." She looked defeated now, trembling, clutching her purse. She tried to argue, to make some plea, but I wasn't listening. I knew the moment her bags were packed, she'd leave for good. I handed her a set of keys, my voice firm. "Here, your key. You won't need it anymore. I want you out of my house, out of my life." She looked at me with hatred, then turned and fled, slamming the door behind her. The house was silent again, save for the pounding of my heart. I sat down heavily, feeling a strange mix of relief and rage. I'd finally exposed her, made her face her own lies. Now I was ready for the fallout. The shame, the guilt, the shame. She'd brought this on herself. As I stared at the empty doorway, I knew I'd won the battle, but I also knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of my revenge, and I was going to see it through. I had everything I needed now. All that was left was to watch her fall apart from the outside. I had made sure she understood she'd been caught, and there was no turning back. The house felt eerily quiet after she left, like a shell of itself. I stood there in the living room, staring at the empty doorway, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd done it. I'd finally put an end to her lies, her betrayal, the whole charade. But beneath the surface, I knew this wasn't just about ending things. It was about making her feel the weight of what she'd done. I'd wanted her to see she couldn't manipulate me anymore, and now that I had the proof, the power was finally mine. That night, I poured myself a shot of whiskey, trying to steady my nerves. My hands trembled slightly, but I ignored it. I was proud, furious, and exhausted all at once. I'd planned this for so long, and now it was over, or so I told myself. I knew better. The real aftermath was about to unfold, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind already working. The first thing I did was make arrangements to meet with a lawyer. I wanted to get everything in order, separate accounts, legal papers, anything that would support my decision to move on without her. I also started drafting a simple letter to her, officially ending things, demanding she stay away, and reminding her she had no claim to anything in this house anymore. That letter would be the last thing she saw, the final nail in the coffin. While I was doing that, I noticed her phone still sitting on the kitchen counter untouched. I figured she'd try to contact me, maybe call or text, but I wasn't interested in hearing from her anymore. Instead, I set up a new email account under a fake name and started sending out some of the evidence I'd collected to her family, anyone who needed to see the truth. I wanted her to realize she'd lost her reputation, her friends, her job, her standing. When she realized what I was doing, I knew her pride would shatter. I could almost see the panic in her eyes through the messages I sent. It felt good. It felt right. The betrayal had to have consequences, and I was more than happy to give her exactly that. Later that day, I went to a local notary to have the formal letter notarized, an official notice that I was terminating all ties. I typed it out carefully, making sure it left no room for misinterpretation. I didn't want her to see any weakness. I wanted her to understand that I was serious. Just as I was finishing, a message pinged on my phone. I hesitated before reading it. It was from her. She was begging, apologizing, claiming that everything was a mistake, that she still loved me and wanted to work things out. Her words were hollow, desperate. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I replied with a simple message. "It's too late. You made your choice. Don't contact me again." That was the final nail. I knew she'd try to come back, try to manipulate her way into my life again, but I wasn't falling for it. I'd already made up my mind. I took a deep breath and looked around the house. It was empty but mine again. The betrayal had been terrible, but at least now I had clarity. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders, even as the ache of betrayal lingered in the back of my mind. It was a brutal lesson, one I'd never forget. Cleaning up her belongings, I found a small note she'd left in her purse. It was a half-hearted apology, filled with excuses and promises to change. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. I wanted nothing to do with her words anymore. I'd already made my decision. She was out of my life, and I was better off without her. As I packed the last of her things, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not happiness exactly, but something close. I'd taken control, reclaimed my dignity, and moved forward on my own terms. I knew the pain of betrayal wouldn't disappear overnight, but I also knew I'd survive and I'd come out stronger. My final act was to hand over her keys, her last reminder of the life I was ending. I went to the front door, opened the lock, and slid the keys onto the table. Then I turned, took a deep breath, and locked the door behind her. As I watched it click shut, I realized one thing. I'd finally shown her that betrayal has consequences, and I was done playing the fool. That day, I learned a hard truth. Sometimes, the only way to move on is to take control and cut out the poison. Because no matter how deep the betrayal, life goes on. And I was ready to rebuild mine without her. In the weeks that followed, I felt a strange calm settle over me, mixed with a lingering sense of loss I couldn't quite shake. Part of me kept replaying everything, the stolen moments, the lies, the betrayal. But another part, the one I chose to focus on, was relief. I finally took back control of my life, and that mattered more than anything else right now. I found myself walking through the house more intentionally, appreciating the silence. The emptiness was a stark contrast to the chaos that had filled it just days before. I had cleared out her belongings, handed her the keys, and made it clear that I was done. I had cut ties, cut her out, and I was finally free of the lies that had poisoned our life together. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for too long, and now I could finally exhale. Reflecting on everything, I realized how much I'd ignored the early warning signs. The little things, her secretive texting, her evasiveness, the hotel, those were all red flags. I'd ignored them, convinced myself I was overthinking. But trusting your gut is vital. I should have seen the signs sooner, acted sooner. But better late than never. Looking back, I see how I was manipulated into feeling guilty, into second-guessing myself. She was good at hiding her lies, but I was good at noticing the cracks. It took a lot of pain and a lot of preparation, but I finally got her to face what she'd done, and I did it without losing my dignity. I wanted her to understand she'd been caught, that there was no way out of the truth, and she finally did. Now I can say with certainty, I'm better off without someone who betrays me, who lies to my face, and who sneaks around behind my back. Maybe I was naive to trust her so blindly, but I've learned a hard lesson. Trust is fragile, and betrayal shatters it. I don't regret what I did. In fact, I feel stronger because of it. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I'll say this: don't ignore the signs. Don't stay silent when your gut is warning you something's wrong. Gather your evidence, plan your steps carefully, and don't be afraid to take control. Revenge isn't about causing pain just for the sake of it. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your self-respect, and your peace of mind. The truth is, you can survive betrayal. You can come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and more cautious. And when you do, forget you're the one in charge now. No one can take away your power unless you give it to them. As I close this chapter of my life, I realize that the pain will fade, but the lessons won't. I've learned to listen more carefully to myself, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the early red flags again. My house is quiet, my mind is clearer, and I'm finally free. And that's all I needed, to know that I was in control of my own future. Without her, that future is wide open. I'm ready to rebuild, to move forward, and to never let anyone betray me like that again. Because at the end of the day, the only person who truly cares about your happiness and your worth is yourself. And I'm finally starting to believe that again.